BCX plywood. BCX just uses different pieces. The main thing I wanted that for is just it has wood glue inside of it that holds all the layers of plywood together that are waterproof. So it's a waterproof wood glue. So that'll just help it weather and last longer. I was gonna get marine grade plywood, but one 4x8 sheet of that was like 122 bucks, was the cheapest I could find. I wasn't gonna do that. So this BCX plywood, it's got the waterproof glue, that's fine. All I'll have to do additionally is throw some type of coating on the bottom and the sides to seal up the wood fibers. So I'm going to use some truck bed coating, and I think that'll work just fine. And as long as it's sealed up, it'll be just as good as that marine grade stuff without having to spend 122 bucks on each damn sheet, because no way. Yeah, that's the plan, and we'll get at it today. Okay, so the conduit pipe is painted black. Before I get the subfloor on, I should probably attach it to the inside of the trailer frame. So I got these little self-tapping screws that I imagine can attach these little straps that are made for conduit to the inside edge. And then I also got a kit to wire up some trailer lights. Came with trailer lights and came with this cord. I'm not a big fan of the end of this thing. It looks pretty cheesy, so I'll probably end up replacing the end. But we're going to run this cord through the conduit and attach the conduit to the inside of the frame. That way I don't have to climb underneath the trailer after the flooring and framing is on top. So yeah, let's get to it. So what I'm doing here is I'm using a thin gauge picture frame wire I had lying around. We're going to use that to fish these trailer wires through this tube, because if you try and feed them through, they're so loose they just bunch up. There we go. I'll just pull it through the wire. There it is. Easy. All right, so these don't work for this. Try again. The last screws didn't work. These should do the job though. I wasn't paying attention when I got the last ones. I was looking at wood to metal, and I didn't even notice that they didn't even have the drill tips. So this should work just fine. Hopefully. So here's how we're looking so far. A couple problems I know I'm going to run into here. Now I purposely left this gap when I cut this for two reasons. One, so this middle piece could get attached to the actual frame. It's got a girder that runs through there. And the other reason is I'm going to have to make some kind of wheel wells to go around this. And so I figured if I leave these two here, then I'd have a spot to actually fix it down with some sturdiness. So that should work out. But here's the other problem. So if you look, you can see there's about a 1/4 inch gap here. And the reason for that is because of the way this frame overlaps. So this support piece right here that runs through and attaches to the main body, it has about a 1/4 inch height that's different. And also these pieces that connect for the legs are a 1/4 inch high here too, which creates that gap. The bumper on the back does not have that 1/4 inch problem. So what I'm going to have to do is shim this, and I think I'll just take some plywood and I'll cut it into strips, throw it in here. It's a 1/4 inch size anyway, and then I'll put the same undercoat spray on top of it. I'll use a construction grade adhesive that you can get that people use for brick and mortar and stuff like that. And then yeah, I'll throw those on there. That should take care of these gaps, and that way when I run a screw through here, it's not going to warp the wood. It's going to actually be nice and even. Yeah, that's the plan. And then a buddy of mine, John, had asked me if I was going to actually build out onto this A-frame, and at first I wasn't gonna because I didn't see a point, but I was thinking about it, and I think I am actually going to. So I'm going to leave this square, but I'm going to find a way to actually measure out and cut a sheet of ply that's going to go over that. The one problem that I'm going to face here is, if you look here, this is flat, but you can see that this kind of goes up at an angle. So the support piece that hooks on with the A-frame doesn't run level with this. It actually gradually slopes up, which shouldn't be too big of an issue. As long as the ply I cut, it's not going to be attached to this anyway. It's just I'm going to have to remember when I build a frame that goes up at a small grade. But yeah, all right, so we'll just keep working on it, I guess. Coming together. At least I don't have to lift this heavy plywood anymore. Okay, well, I used the adhesive to put these spacers on, so that's going to make it level here. But I don't know if I need to do that on these middle beams or not. I don't think I'm gonna, because this this construction adhesive, it's super thick when it comes out of that gun, and it hardens pretty well. It's supposed to cure for 24 hours, so it'll get even harder than it is right now. But I think if I just lay a thick enough of a bead on each one of these beams when I actually do this, I think that'll grab it, and that'll function just like it would if I did this to those middle pieces. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure I really did this to the outside, because I didn't want the board warping down on the edges, and I don't think that'll be the same issue on the inside here. But I'll use a construction adhesive, and I'll attach down the sides, but I won't throw any screws through these middle spots until that adhesive dries. And I think, like I said, that'll function as that little buffer for that space. So yeah. So I had this just floating around the garage for the past couple of years. So I'm actually going to use this to cover up those bits of maple ply. I think it'll be a little bit stronger bond, especially since I'm going to put construction adhesive on that to bind to the plywood. So and this is the coating I was talking about earlier. This is what we're going to put on the bottom and on the edges of that 3/4 inch BCX plywood. It's truck bed liner. Should work just fine to weatherproof the thing, and it should stick on there for a long time. And that way too, as like rocks and stuff hit the bottom of it, it shouldn't end up chipping this off. It should just last pretty good. And this stuff was pretty cheap. I had looked at a different brand where you got a huge box of it, but that was like 90 bucks, and I don't need that much. I think I got this at Walmart for like $15. So just put it on with a roller. So as you can see, I did go and I cut an angled piece for the front there to go over that hitch part of the A-frame. It turned out pretty good. I just forgot to record it. So it ends up taking 2 quarts to finish this off, just because that first layer goes on really thick. Supposed to have 2 coats of it on to have it finished up. I ended up buying 3 just so I had some extra for when I do the wheel wells. But after this gets finished up, just let it dry 2 hours, I think, and then we throw the next coat on. Then I just let it dry overnight. So once this is finished, then tomorrow start on getting the subfloor attached. That's the plan. Long way. All right, so the plan today is going to be to get the subfloor installed on the trailer. So the truck liner coating has dried. Almost feels rough plastic. Feels like it's going to be really sturdy. So I only did that on the underside. I'm not sure what I'm going to do on the top side yet, but we'll kind of see as we go. But I'm going to throw that on the trailer, and then what we'll be using are 2 different types of screws. So we got these here, which are self-tapping metal screws, 3/4 inch length. I got these to run from underneath the frame because the wood itself is 3/4 inch. So with the frame and this, it shouldn't penetrate through the top. So I should be able to secure it from underneath. And then the other type is this, and this is quite a bit longer, but this is made to go specifically through wood and then drill through metal. I don't know if you can see the tips there, but they've got an actual tip that's made to drill through and be self-tapping. So I'll drive these down from the top, and before all that happens, we'll be using a construction grade adhesive, which is this guy right here. So this is made for all sorts of different things, putting cinder block together, metal, all that kind of jazz. And it's supposed to be pretty dang strong. So I got a huge tube, and I'm hoping this is gonna be enough. But yeah, I guess we'll get started. So now that it's kind of lined up where I want it, I'm going to run through and put a couple of these guys through the top just to keep them where I want it to stay before I try and drive some of these up from underneath, because then the board's just going to move if I don't do that. Just gonna use an impact wrench and a little Phillips head. Okay, so what happened there is I put those 1/4-inch plywood pieces in there, but when I did that, it created just enough space to where this wouldn't grab on when it went through the metal. So I went and I got a recessed in drill bit to make a concave opening, so that way it gave it just a little bit more room to grab onto that metal. Yeah, so that's done. Subfloor is officially on there. There's a couple things I'm gonna have to fix, which I knew about anyway. Just because this is such a small angled cut, it's bowing down on both sides. But all I'll do is I'll cut a strip of the same plywood, run it underneath, and that'll just pull this together. I'll just drive some screws in from underneath. And then once the studs and framing's on here, it won't even be affected anymore. So I'm still gonna go through and do some lag bolts from underneath. There's some spots on the frame that go this way and that way all along that I'll just drive some up from underneath. It won't be too much, but yeah, it's a lot more even than I thought it was gonna be. And then those screws I was using, they're flush drive ones, so when you actually drive it in from the top, it drives the head of the screw down in there, so it's actually flush, so that way it's not gonna get in the way of the framing or flooring when I put it on here. So yeah, I can officially walk on this thing. So next is going to be framing after that. Pretty excited. All right, so the initial screws are in around the side. So you might remember when I put that construction adhesive bead on the outside here, I had to put these spacers to keep it level, but I put that bead on super thick in there just to create that buffer. So after it's dried, I should be able to go through and I'm going to run these longer ones. I had to order these off Amazon. I couldn't find anywhere in town that had them, but these are, I want to say they're 2 inches. Might be 2 1/4. I can't quite remember, but I needed longer ones. So these are going to run through on these sides, straight down, and we're secured all the way. And then here, I'm going to have to cut some strips of the 3/4-inch ply that I have left over, scraps. And what we're going to do is affix them in here where this crease is. I'm going to put those flaps underneath, screw them from underneath. I'll use some construction adhesive on it too, just to pull this back. Now this isn't going to be completely true and level there, just because, like I said, this goes up at an angle, right? So the plan is we'll throw these scrap pieces on that side and the other side, just to try and bring this in and hold it. And then when I throw the walls on this and everything, the frame should be strong enough to hold everything else and keep it in place, and that should pull it together. Yeah. Well, so even with the longer screws, it just isn't grabbing the frame right. So what I've got to do is go along, instead of using the countersink bit, I'm just going to use this drill. I'm going to put a couple divot holes throughout there, basically in the countersink spots for the screws to go through, and then they'll sink in and grab. Just adding one extra step, but either way it's a pain in the ass. So here we go. Alright, so we're at the point where we need to take care of sealing the top here. Just trying to make sure that it's all weatherproof, waterproof, that kind of stuff. So I looked at a few different things. I considered using like laminate flooring, you know, that stuff that you just lock together and throw on here. That would cost, oh, I don't know, like $300. And I mean, being outside, this thing's going to be negative cold temperatures, you know, and over 90 degrees, 100 degrees sometimes. So that amount of heat is going to fluctuate that wood, and it's going to keep moving around. And I just don't think it'll last. It's going to be A, too expensive, and since it's so exposed to high fluctuating temperatures, it's not going to last very long. So it was that. I thought about carpet. I thought about just cheap laminate flooring, like the vinyl flooring, you know. I thought that looked tacky as hell, and I didn't think it would last. So what I settled on is this stuff. It's called Granite Grip. So this is by Behr. And it's only $63 for a gallon, right? So kind of expensive for what it is, but still, I've used this before. It says that you can use it on porches and granite, like ideal for garage floors, driveways, porches, and patios. So it should work just fine on this. Very durable stuff. Basically, it'll make it almost feel just like how this driveway is. So yeah, that's the plan. You want to use a 1/4-inch nap adhesive roller, which is what this is. So don't just go using a paint roller, because that's not what you're supposed to use with this stuff. It takes 2 coats, and this stuff's pretty thick, so it's only going to cover 50 square feet, it says. So we're going to be cutting it close. You might have to pick another gallon. I think I might have part of one left over in the garage. But 1 coat. It's going to be really thin for the first coat, because it acts like a primer, and then throw a second coat on after that dries. Yeah, that's where we'll go. So to give you an idea of the consistency of this, look how thick that is. So yeah, here we go. It's almost like wet sand. So it's really tempting to try and go back and put more on to make it this thick right here instead of having it see-through. But the first coat's supposed to be light and splotchy. That's supposed to help prime it and seal it. And then the second coat to go over the top is when you're going to want to be a little bit thicker there, and that should fix all the problems you're seeing right now. So it might look like crap right now, but we'll be okay. Okay, first light coat done. Let it dry, come back out, put it on there thick. Pretty sure I'm going to need a second gallon though. Either way though, even with 2 gallons, it'll be 120 bucks. It's still 75% less than what I was going to spend on it with flooring or something, so it should work. So it's next morning. Ran out of time yesterday. It wasn't quite dry, so I had to leave it sit overnight. But it's supposed to get 70 degrees today, so hopefully that's warm enough to finish it up. That's how we're looking so far, though. Like I said, first coat has to be really light, and that's just to act as a primer. It is definitely going to take 2 gallons, but I lucked out, and I did actually have a leftover like 3/4 gallon in the garage from last time when I worked on the office downstairs. So we're going to get started on this, throw it on. I'll start with a paint roller and the tray, but this stuff is actually made so you could just pour it straight on and just pull it up on there and just spread it around. It does say in the directions to try and not be uniform in how you spread it, because it's supposed to look like concrete. I'm not too worried about that though, just to keep the wood sealed and have a nice grip when we're walking inside. But it's an epoxy kind of base, so it should fill up these little divots that I've got from putting the screws through. So yeah, let's get going. One thing to keep in mind when you're using an adhesive roller and you're dealing with something that's more of like an epoxy covering is it's not about, the roller's job isn't to basically paint, it's to shift the material all over the plane that you're trying to get this covered with. You're trying to shift it out as even as possible and knock down any ridges. It'll eventually kind of level itself a little bit in some of these spots. But like when you have these really high ridges, you want to make sure you just knock them down. So once we get this on, it's going to be a lot of just going back over what we already put down, just to try and smooth it out. Okay, so now I got all this extra here. I'm just going to keep shifting that around, leveling out and just spreading it through the rest of these areas. Let it fill up some of these holes from the screws, fill up some of the cracks in the wood. It'll be pretty thick, but it'll be worth it when it dries. Okay, so there's what it should be looking like. Not too bad. All right, so once this dries, it'll have, you can kind of see it now, but it'll basically have the same texture as this concrete. Be nice and grippy. That way when you're getting that and out of here, you got ice on your shoes or something, you don't have to worry about slipping, or if it gets wet in there, you don't have to worry about it. So yeah, a couple little things that I'm gonna go through and kind of touch up still, but otherwise, yeah, that last little roll over, pretty good job. I'm still gonna have to go through real quick. I'll take a towel, and I've got like this bleed over along the edges, around the sides, you know, that I'll have to go through and clean up. But yeah, other than that, we'll let it dry, and then hopefully get started on some walls today. If this dries fast enough, I don't know, I put it on there pretty thick, so might not be able to get started tomorrow. But yeah, here we go. Well, that's it, pretty well dried out. It's got that nice grit to it, so it'll be nice and grippy. So it does say you need to give it like 72 hours before you put heavy foot traffic on it and stuff. But I think it's dry enough that we can start putting some walls up. So now that I think about it, before we start getting the walls on, which I'm really excited to start doing that part, but I guess we can put it off again, should probably figure out these wheel wells. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a sheet of cardboard and I'm going to draw out the design that I want to do, which is just going to be, you know, half an octagon here, just over and down. I guess a quarter of an octagon. And then I'll use that cardboard as a template, and I'll throw that on the scrap 3/4 inch ply that we still got, cut that out, put a back wall that's going to be that shape, and then I'll have this part follow along those angles and wall down. Construction adhesive, screw it down to the frame, construction adhesive there, screw it down to that. The whole thing though on the inside is going to have to get coated with that truck bedding though. So yeah, let's figure this out first, I think. Yeah. Alright, this isn't going to be anything too fancy, right? Main thing is that's just that it matches up with what I'm picturing in my head here, and then I can repeat it over on the other side. So this is just a scrap piece of cardboard I use for staining inside the garage when I'm working on stuff. So I'm just going to look at, let's see, you go from there to there. I think I want it to be about that high. We'll throw a corner here and a corner here, and then we'll just connect it. I'll go a little lower than that, I guess, because I'm not good at drawing that. Alright, so that's our rough idea. So that way, it's over here. It's going to go up and over. And yeah, wall piece at the back, cut pieces that follow that, and it'll look nicer than my little doodle there when it's done. So, yep. Okay, so we got the general idea. Now let's make it a little bit more precise since we kind of know what we're doing here. So I'm just going to measure what that distance is at 6 inches. Well, that's also 6 inches, so even though it didn't look like I had it spot on, it looks like I did. So we'll just connect these. 6 inches to 6 inches. Okay. And then connect these a little bit straighter. Now if you look at it, this does have a little bit more angle and it's a little bit higher, not higher, but fatter at the end here where it comes down. But I'm not too worried about that. I think that'll look just fine. So now we'll cut that out and that's going to be our template. Alright. Nobody tell Human Resources in Walmart that I still have my old box knife from years ago. Because I used to tell people that you had to pay $2 to get a new one if you lost it. Because people kept losing all the damn time. So yeah, if you're watching, Mr. Bosworth, I'm sorry, but this is mine now. Okay. Now normally I'd use a pencil for this, but it doesn't matter too much because we're just going to cover it up with that black bed liner anyway, so I'm not too worried. Actually, you know what? Make it easier. Let's just run our template right off of this one. That way, half the cutting. Alright, so there's the idea. So that's going to sit just like that. I'm going to trim the corners just a tiny bit, but then what we'll do is we'll mimic those angles with other pieces of 3/4 inch ply. We'll follow that along, go over the top, follow it down, and that'll come out to be flush with this base right here. We'll assemble that, and then before we attach it, we'll just take the whole thing, cover it in that same bedding cover. Yeah. So since I measured this spot, in between where the wall is going to be and the edge of the frame is 13 inches. All I had to do is rip out a piece of 13-inch wide leftover scrap when we did the subfloor. And now we can use this. We'll do an angle here on the bottom, cut that angle out, probably on the table saw also. But then we'll just follow this around from there, just like that. We'll cut an angle and then we'll just keep following. So just a quick tip. We wanted to find the angle for where this is going to be resting on the frame, so the opposite of this angle basically. It's going to come down and it's going to have to match. So we need to find that angle. All you do is use the angle you're trying to get lined up with, and you can draw your mark off of this angle, and the angle that's going to rest on the frame, which will be the opposite, is going to match with this. At least it should, in theory. All I'm doing is just I got it kind of close to the size it's going to need it to be, just so it's easier for me to run this through to try and get this angle. And we'll come back and trim it down. Alright, see how that works. Alright, so that's going to line up pretty good like that. The issue we're going to run into is back here. So I wonder if I shouldn't actually I think we will. I think what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to run a strip, a 3/4 inch strip right here, just to make this easier. So what we'll do is we'll measure out, we'll run a 3/4 inch strip. That'll attach to the bottom of this, so it'll just lock right in, and then that'll line up. That'll also make it easier to run screws through it, because then it'll have a flat base versus this crooked stuff. Yeah, this is what we're looking for right here. And then we'll have to cut this at an angle for another piece through. So let's get a strip cut and we'll throw a strip in there. 13 inches. Alright, so I made 4 of them. 1 inch wide. So you see how that brings us up level to the subfloor basically? And then this guy will go on here with the angle that it's got. And we'll just attach it all together. Yeah. I'm a very visual person. I'll keep coming back and doing the same thing over and over to see what it actually looks like. And tweaking it versus, you know, there's people out there that'll come up with a program and draw it out. This is exactly where everything's going to go. This is exactly how much wood I need. Yeah, I don't function like that. But yeah, there we go. So I did cut that other piece while I still had the table saw angle lined out. So we're going to attach this piece to the bottom of this piece, and that'll give us that. And we'll cut that angle and then move on. Okay, so all we're going to do now, we got the strips cut. We're just going to use some, this is Type Bond 3 wood glue. The reason I'm using that is because it's waterproof. I'll use it on my birdhouses too. And we're just going to throw this 1 inch strip on here with the wood glue, and then we're going to use a brad nail gun, and we're going to brad nail that in so that'll hold it while the wood glue dries. That'll just be a nice bond for when we actually have to attach it to the bottom of the trailer. Couple things to keep in mind whenever you're using wood glue on the end, the edge of a piece of wood, it sucks in a lot of that glue, so sometimes it takes a little bit more than what you would think, just to make sure you have a nice coating on there. Okay, line that up. crazy amount, just 3 is good enough. Holds that in there, sandwiches it in, and then it'll dry. It only takes about an hour for it to really get a good solid dry. Okay. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to do that to all 4. So we got 2 of them done. Next 2, get that done, let them dry, and then move on to the middle piece. Okay, so sorry, because I forgot to turn on the camera while I was cutting this stuff. I got a little sidetracked, but I went through and I threw a 45-degree bevel cut on these. Now I went a little bit too far here, which is fine. The reason I did 45 degrees is that way when this meets up, I can just cut one piece and it'll meet at a 90-degree angle in between there. And this part here will be a little proud, but I'll just run a sander on that, it'll be fine. I mean, no one gonna know but me. But so what I'll do is I'll use some wood glue and some brad nails, throw this together, and I'm going to go in and figure out exactly the length to throw in the middle there, throw that in the middle, get it glued together, and then I might throw some wood screws through it, and go from there. And then this one will be done. I'll just rinse and repeat on the other side. So same thing as before, we're going to use some wood glue and brad nails. Just put this together, and then I'll go back through with some construction screws and use that to tighten everything up. Only going to use 2, because once again it's just to hold it long enough for me to get some screws in there. Let's do the other side. Alright, so now we just gotta measure this distance. I'm gonna leave this alone for a little bit, just so it dries up a little bit. The reason I did this way, it's gonna be way easier for me just to take this in, measure the distance, get it to fit, wood glue it and screw it and all that kind of stuff in there. And then we'll bring it back out once it's done, because we'll have to paint it and all that kind of jazz. And then all it's gonna be is just slapping it in place. Now right here it's a little bit off because there's some construction adhesive that's pushing through, but when we actually throw this in, it should tighten up. Shouldn't be a problem. So all we're going to do is go through, we're going to use some 2-inch construction screws. And we're just going to drive that home from the top here. Now we cut our 13-inch. Let's figure out what we need here. Looks like 17, just a little under 3/4. All right. Let's see. It might be a little loose, but I think that'll tighten up just fine. All right, so we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna wood glue it, and then brad nail it and screw it on. But one thing I don't like, let me bring it over here. So you can see this amount of gap that's going on. Now it's flush up here though, right? When you actually squeeze it together, it does line up. But the problem is, since this is cut at such an angle, it's got a larger surface area to grab, and then you're going to have a really weak connection point right here, even when we're on a construction screw through there. So what I think we need to do is we'll cut another one just like this, and then we're going to wood glue them together. We'll laminate them together is what it's called, to make this into a thicker piece, and then we'll bring it back and put it back in, just so it's a little bit more structurally sound. Huh? Sounds good to me. Nothing too crazy. Probably should have mentioned that before. We don't do this a lot. Just the thing to keep in mind is we already had one that was the perfect size. So all I did was sit on top of the other 13-inch stock, line it up with the edge of the blade, kept this on top, and just use this as a template guide to cut the second one. That is the exact same width and size. Work smarter. Now we're just going to laminate these together with wood glue. Once again, we'll just use brad nails again. I'm not going to bother spreading this out with my finger. Partly because I'm too lazy to do it, but also because it's not going to need it anyway. We're just throwing this together anyway. All right. Got that. Throw this one on top. There's some downward pressure. You'll be surprised when you're wood gluing stuff together. Once you actually put that pressure on there, it does do a pretty good job of actually holding it together on. Ooh, well, usually. Of holding it together on its own for the most part. But as that wood dries, if you don't have this with some form of clamping pressure, which we're going to use the brad nails to do that, sometimes that wood can separate and expand a little bit. Our now much thicker plywood piece. Okay, so here's how we're looking now. So this will line up, that'll line up. You can see you got so much more. So now when we actually screw through this, it's going to allow a lot more wood to grab here. Same thing all the way down. So we will do the same thing with the other one. But right now we'll throw some wood glue on here, get some screws in it, and this will dry on its own. I don't have to wait for it, so it'll be fine. Well, I thought about it a little bit more, and I decided I am going to throw a couple exterior construction wood screws through this guy just to bind it together more. Just because otherwise I keep thinking about it. And why not? There we go. Now the ultimate dad comment, that's not going anywhere. Okay. Now we should be able to run some screws to the side now. This is that side that it didn't quite line up, so I don't think it matters too much though, no one's going to see it. Once we put some trim around the outside anyway, no one should see it. One down. Rinse and repeat on the other one. Well, I'm losing the daylight, but finished getting them put together. So here's where we're sitting. A little dark, but yeah, it's all right. Now some of the stuff, like I get how that doesn't line up there because I had that raised up and all that kind of shit. But at the same time, once the framing's up and some trim goes around this, dude, ain't no one gonna fucking know. So, yep. Feels like I've been saying this for the past couple videos now, but I'm hoping that I get to actually start doing some framework tomorrow. But yeah, coming together. So those are going to get the truck bed liner painting on the inside of it. Inside here, I'm just going to leave them alone. I don't think I'm going to paint them. But as long as underneath is taken care of. But yeah. I like how it angles down a little more at the front, even though that was kind of an accident. It gives it the illusion of speed, like the lines on a race car. So yeah. All right. Well, tomorrow then. See you tomorrow.